Dracula has lived 1,000 lives in cinema, yet only a few versions truly leave a mark on our nightmares and passions. In 1992, Francis Ford Coppola offered Bram Stoker's Dracula, a lush operatic blend of horror and romance. It was intense, sensual, and theatrical, where Jonathan Harker's journey guides much of the narrative. The story began with a solicitor entering a mysterious castle.
Help me.
But it soon unraveled into something far more tragic. The story of love, damnation, and a man who defied God for the sake of his beloved. But in 2025, Luc Besson returns to the myth with Dracula, a love tale, and this time the lens shifts. The story no longer follows the man who enters the Count's world. It centers on the Count himself. Gone is the firm human anchor. What we get instead is something more poetic, more interior. It's less about the solicitor caught in a nightmare and more about the nightmare himself, the immortal cursed by grief, longing, and unbearable memory. Same legend, very different focus. And it's in that shift between Harker's lens and Dracula's inner world that these two films tell not just different stories, but different truths. Truths about obsession, identity, and what it means to live forever in love, in sorrow, and in darkness. So today, we're going deep, exploring how these films diverge in narrative perspective, what critics and audiences preferred, and why Dracula 1992 and Dracula 2025 feel like two mirrors reflecting different fears. One of the most significant differences between these two films is perspective. Who are we following? Whose eyes guide us? In Dracula 1992, Jonathan Harker is not just a bystander, he's the entry point. Played by a young Keanu Reeves, Harker is the mortal compass, the man who ventures into the unknown. Through his letters, his horror, his disbelief, we're introduced to the vampire's world. He's not the hero in the traditional sense, but he is the anchor. Even though his role fades as other characters rise to the forefront, the film starts with him, centers on him, and grounds us in his fear and confusion. The viewer begins wide-eyed and human, and only then are we pulled into the seduction and the madness. In contrast, Dracula: A Love Tale 2025 shifts the weight of the narrative. Harker still exists, but his role is muted. He's not the guide, Dracula is. This time, the monster is the protagonist. The story flows from his grief, his obsession, his eternal regret. Rather than observing the Count through someone else's eyes, we sit beside him, trapped in his castle, in his memories, in his curse. This shift creates a very different emotional rhythm. In 1992, we were afraid of Dracula. In 2025, we ache with him. Because of this shift in focus, the structure of each film evolves differently. Coppola's Dracula follows a classic Gothic structure. The first act builds suspense, a man alone in a foreign land, surrounded by shadows and whispers. The middle act descends into horror and temptation. The final act is a race against time, love clashing with damnation. It's a well-balanced arc. Despite its operatic scale and stylized flair, the story stays grounded. Every narrative detour, letters, dreams, visions, still ties into the central conflict between love and damnation.
Oh, my love.
Dracula 2025, on the other hand, plays like a dream. Its structure is less linear, more emotional. Scenes bleed into each other like memories. There are time jumps, surreal montages, and whispered monologues. At times, it feels like poetry. Both versions of Dracula are rooted in suffering, cursed with immortality, haunted by love, trapped between worlds. But the way that pain is portrayed couldn't be more different. In Dracula 1992, we feel his torment through monologues, visual poetry, and his desperate pursuit of Mina. His agony is theatrical, passionate, dramatic, even noble. But we remain observers, watching a legend mourn. In Dracula 2025, that pain is quieter but cuts deeper. The film lingers on silence, memory, and loss. Dracula doesn't shout his grief, he wears it. His sadness seeps into the pacing, the atmosphere, the pauses between words. And for many viewers, it becomes hard not to feel for him. This Dracula isn't just feared, he's pitied. If Coppola's Dracula was a tragic figure, Besson's is a broken one.
The curse will disappear if I do. You will regain your freedom.
But you're my freedom. You are my freedom, my love.
Every Dracula needs a hunter, and Abraham Van Helsing fills that role, but how much space he's given depends on which version you're watching. In Dracula 1992, Van Helsing, played by Anthony Hopkins, is a vital presence but not the center of the story. He's eccentric, sharp, and provides key exposition about Dracula's nature. Yet, much of the film's emotional weight belongs to Jonathan and Mina. When Dracula dies, it's Mina, not Van Helsing, who delivers the final blow, closing the tale with tragic tenderness. But in Dracula, A Love Tale, 2025, Van Helsing has more scenes, more weight, and more edge. Here, he's a colder, more determined force, a man haunted by the very creature he hunts. The film gives him far more screen time than in 1992, shaping him into a relentless antagonist to Dracula's introspective sorrow. And in the final confrontation between Van Helsing and Dracula, it wasn't a battle. It was a release. Van Helsing, now a priest and hunter worn by years of pursuit, finally fulfills his duty. He drives the final blow, but there's no triumph in his eyes, only sorrow.
Only you can change destiny, my son. Save her, then you'll be in peace for eternity.
Let it be.
You don't leave me, man.
Hurry up before I change my mind.
And this time, Dracula doesn't fight back. He welcomes the end, not for redemption but for love, for his Elisabetta. He sacrifices himself so she can live free of his curse. And as the priest lowers his weapon, there's a silence heavier than any scream, because even the monster deserved a moment of peace. Visually, the two films couldn't be more different, and yet both leave a strong impression. Coppola's 1992 film is a masterclass in practical effects and Baroque excess. He insisted on doing everything in camera, forced perspective, shadow puppetry, rear projections. The result is a world that feels physical, textured, and alive with stone corridors, velvet curtains, gilded mirrors, and firelight flickering on fangs. Every frame looks like a painting, lush, heavy, romantic. It's as if the film itself is soaked in blood and perfume. Besson's 2025 film, by contrast, leans into modern surrealism. Shot in Finland, Paris, and the Jura Mountains, it blends the cold beauty of natural landscapes with stylized sets and effects. It uses slow motion, time lapses, and bold color shifts. The visual language is poetic, but sometimes overly calculated. The production design is stunning, no question. Dracula's castle is less a medieval fortress and more a decaying dream. Costumes are rich, if slightly theatrical. But some critics argue the film's visual ambition occasionally overwhelms its substance, too much style. Still, one thing is clear. Both films look like Dracula. They just imagine his world through very different eyes, one drenched in shadow and silk, the other fractured through memory and frost. In Dracula, 1992, love and horror dance together. Dracula is both terrifying and tragic, a warrior cursed by love, damned by grief. He shakes his fist at God. He believes his beloved has returned, and for that he will cross oceans of time and spill oceans of blood. But the story doesn't forget who he is: a predator, a seducer, a curse in flesh. The romance never excuses the horror. That tension between passion and monstrosity gives the film its power. In Dracula 2025, the romance takes center stage. The horror is subdued, or at least stylized. Dracula isn't just grieving, he's unraveling. The film explores themes like memory, obsession, and the erosion of identity over time. What does it mean to be someone when everyone you love has turned to dust? What does eternity do to the soul? Some viewers call it profound, others call it pretentious. The shift from external horror to internal anguish is bold, but risky. You either connect with Dracula's sadness, or you drift from it. So when you place these two films side by side, you don't just see different directors or styles. You see two visions of what Dracula means. 1992 invites you into a gothic nightmare full of fear and desire. 2025 invites you into a haunted heart where time collapses and memory bites back. And maybe, in the end, Dracula is most eternal not because he kills, but because we keep remaking him. Each version feeds off the last. Each generation dreams of him differently. One legend, infinite reflections.